thing here. Good evening. My name's Tom Riome. I'm chairman of the Public Works Committee. We're meeting this evening at 6 p.m. Tuesday, July 3rd, 2018, in the first floor conference room at City Hall. With that, we'll go around the room and just introduce ourselves.
I am Thad Kubishak, member of the Public Works Committee.
Joe Terry, Director of Public Works.
Paul Voller, Public Works Superintendent.
Lee Graff, Alderperson.
Shane Blazer, Alderperson.
All right.
Colin Cronin, I'm here because of a requirement for Boy Scout stuff.
Okay,
Cool.
good.
Welcome.
Item number 1, review the DPW report.
I'm taking notes tonight. Clerk couldn't be here, so I'll take minutes. So on the DPW report, I will just mention a couple of things that I think are noteworthy. As you can see on the report, there's a lot of activity that was done this month. I think noteworthy at the airport, jet fuel A is up 14,000 gallons this month over last year at the same time. 300% increase, and their monthly revenue on fuel was $78,000 this last month. So fuel sales have been good. The transient activity, that doesn't include the regular locals. This is transient activity from outside the area. 42 jets, 13 turboprops, and 33 piston engine aircrafts. That's a lot of traffic from outside the area coming to visit. I did want to mention too, I wanted to call something out. 193 diggers locates for storm sanitary. That's 9 or 10 a day. You know, we've got engineering staff goes and does that work, but it's been keeping them pretty busy.
I'm sorry, Joe. Who are all the requests for those digger houses?
Anything.
Private parties, residents?
Private parties, residents, okay. City projects, any excavation that takes place within the corporate limits of the city, we'll get a digger's notice on, and our staff will go out then and mark sanitary and storm. Sure. Water utility uses
USIC.
Yeah, USIC. And then Solaris and Charter, and they all use the same, or one or two different outfits. Our construction projects are coming along pretty good. High Street, the crews are currently between 8th and 9th. We have run into significant hard rock there. We've got a big machine. We've got a ripper tooth, and we've got we're renting a huge vibratory hammer, and we've gotten into some material that we're not even cracking that with. It's just mushrooming the tip. So today Paul met with some staff or some consultants, some blasting contractors, and we're looking at doing some blasting work to keep that project going. The wastewater force main project's moving along pretty good. They have finished the pilot bore. They're pulling the reaming bore back, and another couple weeks they should be pulling the new force main through that hole across the river. We're going to talk a little bit later this evening about the lift station projects. I won't get into that a whole lot. The East Riverbank Trail project's going along pretty good. We did have some unanticipated work there where the storm sewer, sanitary sewer, was at a higher elevation than was anticipated, and so the new storm sewer was going to conflict with it. We sat down, we're talking, about some change order stuff, and I didn't feel that route was going very well, and so we managed to use some of the existing pay items. Basically, we're paying for 48-inch pipe for 36 that's going in, but they wanted $500 a foot for 36-inch pipe, and that was completely unreasonable. So we were able to work within the confines of the existing contract there. You can see some of the streets and wastewater work. We did a presentation to Newton Rotary, similar to what was offered to the Committee of the Whole on aquatics. We've interviewed and made an offer for our vacant parks maintenance and arborist, and she started yesterday. We interviewed and made an offer for the Public Works Administrative Assistant, and that's been accepted, and they're in the process of finalizing the, the kind of the pre-employment testing. We met with our engineering staff, Town of Grand Rapids, to discuss access to Mariani with their expansion and trucking needs. Washington Street is in the Town of Grand Rapids in that area, and so we were talking about some some preliminary discussion about the future of that street and how it might be funded. And I guess the other two noteworthy things: attended the bike share ribbon cutting ceremony at Veterans Park, and had a really neat opportunity to attend the National Guard and Reserve Boss Lift at Camp Douglas to learn about the importance of working with our Guard and Reserve employees and the responsibilities that they have as citizen soldiers, and got to be on board a KC-135 refueling tanker, and got to be right up with the pilots and right back in the boom pod with the staff refueling. So that was pretty exciting. It was very unique.
Is that it, Joe, then?
That's it. The rest you can read. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will, as usual, get this on the website for the community to have access to.
Okay, good. Item 2, review proposed capital improvement plan.
So this plan is pretty comprehensive. I do have an extra copy of it.
Thank you.
This is the same schedule that was handed out last month, and it includes a list of street, water utility, sidewalk, storm sewer, some building projects, wastewater, and try to include all of our upcoming projects. We do still have some work to do with some of our more building specific. We want to try to get HVAC, other, I'll call them routine building type activities in this plan, so that we can forecast, replacement of water heaters, heating units, air handling units, things like that. But we're making good progress. So this thing is a little complicated to read, and so in your packet I did break it down a number of different ways. It's broken down by individual type of projects. So the street components are listed, the sanitary components are listed. This large 11 by 17 that I handed out has everything kind of put together, and it's sorted by year. I also have on the screen just kind of an overview map that shows, where these projects are in general, and we can talk about any one of them and what year they're proposed. The challenge here is maintaining our streets and our infrastructure and trying to balance the needs of all the utilities and provide the best value, since dollars are short. Been working with the wastewater department, with the water and electric utility, with our engineering department, who oversees the stormwater utility, and then with the streets department, reviewing our street conditions to try to put together projects where there's a common request. There are some cases where that's not practical. We've got a short project next year, for example, on 10th Street South, that the road is over 40 years old. If we let it go, it'd probably have another 6 to 8 years left in it before it would need to be replaced. But the water utility's got a need there. They want to get that done. So, we've included that in the capital plan and are planning to do that work. Some of these projects, when we take a look at these on the map, it's kind of nice. I look in this area on the west side of town. We've got a few projects that it'd be nice to do all those in the same year, since we're in the same neighborhood. But as I'm floating through these and trying to assess the prior needs for the various utilities, some can't wait that long, and in other cases we don't have enough budget to try to lump a few of them. So try to do the best that we can. But we can certainly move projects around and address them. So if there's questions and things like that, we can work through these.
As far as that is related, Joe, like you said, it would be kind of nice to tackle a number of road projects in the same area, but especially the ones that connect with each other,
Yes.
connect through each other.
Right.
On the other hand, is there a large mobilization cost difference with contractors if it's kind of spread out in the city, or it is the cost not so much rather than tying in each project so that there isn't an overlap?
Yeah, our biggest issue is really convenience for the general public. Since we do most of our own construction work, the contract work that we're bringing in is for curb and gutter, sidewalk, flat work, as well as the paving. And generally with the concrete work, there's 2 different crews involved. We generally try to let them as one project, and so we've got repair work. The same contractors doing the repair work as they're doing the larger work, and so they'll generally have 2 different crews that they'll bring in. They'll have one crew that's just doing the small flat work, the removals, replacement, and then they'll have a crew with a curb machine and a bigger flat work crew come in and work on our street projects. And we work pretty well with them, and you know, a lot of times because we have multiple projects throughout the summer, they want to come here, get some done, but then they have other places to go to. And so that works pretty well for them because they can work that well within their schedule too. So I don't think that there's a big issue at this point as far as mobilization. There would be if you know, we were having to cart our whole around all over the place. You know, we have a cost. We don't have the trucking equipment for that, so we have to rent that when we want to trailer that thing around.
I do think it's important to mention the means and methods have changed in terms of mobilization to save costs of trucking material back and forth to pits and trying to find more localized. I know not every project can you do that, but some projects you've been able to keep your stockpile and materials close to the project. I think that's been an improvement that's been from a mobilization standpoint, because it is expensive to mobilize and move that equipment back and forth.
Right.
Not to mention material.
So when you look at the 5 years that you have down there, are these projects ready to go now?
So 2019 is pretty much ready to go. We'll be getting those plans out to the other utilities, you know, within the next month or 2. The 2020 projects are well in the design stages right now. Our goal is to have projects with designs completed a year in advance. The 2021 projects, our survey department is out doing some of the survey work, capturing that data now, so that as soon as our design staff is done with the 2020 stuff, they'll be starting to work on the 2021. So we do really try to look at this as a 5-year plan and recognize that the council can't necessarily commit to dollars for those future projects, but if we can, for the most part, commit to a plan contingent upon budget funding. Emergencies, things happen, sometimes we have to juggle projects, but we want to try to make sure that we're using our design staff and our survey staff as efficiently as possible. And over the past several years, we've been struggling to have plans done and utilities notified well in advance of a project. The further ahead we can notify the gas utilities and and Solaris and phone and cable TV, if they're looking at doing improvements, they're a lot more cooperative to get in here, get them done ahead of us, and get out. So it helps our project if we've got our crews and their crews working in the same area. That's not usually real cost effective either. We're all kind of bouncing off of each other instead of getting a lot of work done. So there's some real advantages to designing them out in front. It's challenging from a budget standpoint though, because the city hasn't committed dollars to these projects otherwise. So we realize that they may get moved around or whatever. We may have a set of plans partly on the shelf. And, we want to avoid that though, because we don't have extra staff time for designing a project. We need them designing that project because there's not a lot of time. And if all of a sudden we shelf that and grab something else, it could put us behind a little bit. So we want to look at these projects carefully and, you know, especially through 2021, 2022, make sure that we've got a pretty good handle on them and are comfortable with those projects. There are two other projects that I did want to mention that are towards the end of this, but they're big projects. And that is some maintenance work for 8th Street South, as well as the Riverview Expressway. 8th Street South, we've gotten to the point where concrete repairs are no longer, they're no longer a good value. We can spend a lot of money making repairs that, and we have limited funds to make those repairs. So we want to put our dollars on our better streets where it makes sense, focus on our better streets so that we can make them last a lot longer rather than spending a lot of money to get an extra 4 to 5 years out of something. So what we're proposing is 8th Street South from the expressway to Griffith would be some type of an overlay in coordination with the DOT. Maybe a pulverize, there may be some, you know, I know the water utilities had a number of issues on 8th Street with the condition of the water main. There may be some utility work in conjunction with it. But I felt it's important for us to specifically call these two projects out so that we can start communications with the DOT and let them know that that's what the city's intentions are. Because our desires financially may not align with the state's desires financially. So I want to try, you know, on these maintenance projects, I want to try to get them out in front of them, you know, 5-6 years in advance. The Riverview Expressway would be from West Grand to County W. That would also be an overlay. You know, we're over 50% patch on those already, and you know, we can keep patching them, but it's not a cost-effective means of maintaining those roadways. And once we've done the overlay, then the state will be pretty serious about trying to pencil it in as an enumerated project for the future. We may get another 10 to 15 years out of that overlay. You know, especially 8th Street it really needs to be replaced now. But it's not something the state will go along with. So, you know, we have to kind of follow their playbook. But I did want to call those out specifically. And if there is a recommendation to approve the plan contingent upon you know, budget allocations, I'd like to make sure that we specifically mention those two, so that when we make notice to the DOT, we've got, you know, written council support to start those negotiations.
What would we look at there? What is, in your opinion, a negotiation number that the state would get back if we're looking at mill and overlay? That would probably.
Yeah, at this point, I'm not sure. You know, I don't know exactly to what extent the state would participate in that type of project, but we do have to get approval from the state in any case, anytime it's over a 2-inch lift on a maintenance project. So no matter what we do, we've got to get at least their blessing on it, that it's a wise way, even if it's all city funds, in order to perform the maintenance work.
Yeah, 8th Street is in a tough condition. Also, I do believe that the concrete patching that we've been doing previous with a contractor, now in-house, I can't think of a bad stretch right as I'm thinking right now. Whereas on 8th Street, I could probably pick out 10 of them off the top of my head, especially since this last weekend. But yeah, I mean, the expressway, you know, having that as a plan, but really especially looking at, you know, having a negotiation plan for 8th Street for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where if you're not aware, this year there's a maintenance project from Tractor Supply to Highway 73 that the DOT is actually replacing that whole 4-lane section.
Oh wow.
And I think that is like 15 to 18 years newer than what 8th Street is, and or even the expressway.
It starts Monday, and there's some serious questions about politics on that section, right? I mean, it's 15 years newer.
Yeah,
and we feel
it behooves us to, you know, obviously get you know, a concerted message to some of those folks to say, what the heck are the priorities here in terms of the DOT's planning? Because I smell a rat, but there's some.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing, kind of why we had this discussion about planning obsolescence with this, is that the DOT goes around with their LiDAR ban or some sort of ban that judges ride quality and everything like that, and that pavement was like 25 points away from being, our pavement was 25 points away from being a problem as far as they were concerned, you know, and so that's where we're like, well, okay, we have, you know.
We've done an excellent job of maintaining the road, and our staff deserves credit for that. The challenge is that we all know, the engineers know it, the engineers at the DOT know it. You look at the condition of that pavement, it's end of life.
Mm-hmm.
But their standard is ride quality. And because we've done an excellent job of maintenance, it still rides okay. So we have to focus on maintaining the ride quality on the rest of our concrete streets and focus on using those dollars wisely there. And unfortunately, we have to plan the obsolescence of 8th Street because it is obsolete.
It's old.
And you know,
What is the utility life? Where is it at?
that was
I'm sure it's in sections, so.
We've had a lot of breaks, right?
Well, I know we have, that's why.
Well, that's
Early
unfortunately
70s,
doesn't
right?
drive it for the DOT's eyes. They didn't care about the ride quality, not the underground.
You know, the section from 2 Mile to the city limits, I think that was built in the middle 80s, early 80s. I mean, I remember as a kid that being a 2-lane section.
I do too.
But then I think from 2 Mile to 8th Street, that was done in the, I'd be guessing.
70s.
Yeah, I think it's in the 70s, like 73, somewhere in there.
Unfortunately, we have to live with the consequences of planned obsolescence and a rough ride until the deal, right? And
Exactly.
residents having to deal with the fact that we've accepted that we're not going to do any significant maintenance there because, as the DOT tells us, it prolongs the scheduled replacement or any major maintenance intervention. So it puts us all in a bad spot locally, I think, to deal with.
Right,
that.
and we're also obligated to perform maintenance activities. If we were to neglect our roads, when it comes time for the DOT to take a look at it, there have been other projects where the DOT comes in and says, well, you haven't performed your maintenance activities well, and so you're going to pay a higher percentage of the replacement costs. That's certainly just not the case here. I mean, the meetings that we've had with the DOT, they've recognized that the city's done an excellent job of maintaining those roads over the years.
And it looks like that piece around airport was built in 1970.
Going on 50.
Yeah.
That was the kind of the comical part. I found an article in one of the municipal magazines, and they were talking about, or maybe it was an email or something, but they were talking about the Beltline down in Madison being 28 years old, and people were frustrated because the DOT didn't have a plan to rebuild that yet. And it was in the article it says Beltline lives past its life expectancy, and I'm like, well, shoot, that was built when? And you know, the expressway and or 8th Street is still going strong and in pretty good shape, you know. And I kind of sent that email to Joe, and I'm like, well, shoot, we should be rebuilding it 10 years ago, you know.
Right.
So
Yeah. Again,
obviously we're not seeing 15 to 20,000 cars a day, you know, but
Yeah. But I do think that we as a municipality need to play the leadership role and and demonstrate to the DOT why it's a priority and that the city's committed to it. So.
Joe, do you want to mention the raw water main projects in here? I mean, this group hasn't been a part of a lot of the discussions with the utility in the last number of years on challenges of accommodating a raw water main project as the utility plans its
Yes,
budget
so
for participation in our projects.
there is, the utilities requesting a number of raw water main projects, and I actually, and I didn't make the change yet, but, you can see like in 2021, kind of the middle of the page, if you scroll down the left side where it says water utility, there's one that's kind of in a lighter blue color. They're gonna start replacing some of the raw water lines, and those are from the wells to the treatment facility. The utility has asked that
other water main projects be significantly reduced while they're spending that 5-year period working on their various raw water projects. And so I'm trying my best to accommodate that request, but it really is challenging because a number of reasons. Number one, there's a lot of infrastructure that's worn out, underground infrastructure, sanitary sewer, water main that's 100 years old, and you really can't replace a street and the sanitary sewer and leave a 100-year-old water main in the street. I mean, just the compaction efforts to prepare the street are probably going to wreck what's left of that water main, and we'll be tearing out, the utility will be tearing out a brand new street in short order. And so the challenge there is that, like, for example, this year, the wastewater utility is embarking on an enormous set of projects for the West Side Lift Station and the river crossing force main. The wastewater utility is also fully partnering in our street rehabilitation process. So, you know, the utility's not backing off on the regular replacement activities because those are collaborative projects. We have to work together on those projects. And so that's been a challenge, trying to put this together to try to back off a little bit on our infrastructure. The other challenge we have is that the city's committed to a construction crew. The equipment, the staff, the expertise, the way we draw our plans, that all changes if we contract that work out. And in this economy anyway, no bid projects are a common occurrence, where there's too much work for the contractors that are out there and you won't get a price on the project, so it has to wait till next year anyway. So there's a number of reasons why having a construction crew makes good sense. If we do more work, does it make sense to have another crew? Probably not. You know, you find the value in what you can do and keep them very active and busy. There's a lot of conveniences, and it works well for us. That said, the city, through its general fund, is paying for the street portion of these projects. The construction staff's time, most of it is not spent on the street portion of these projects. It is spent on the underground stuff, water utility, sanitary sewer, storm sewer. And those utilities pay those costs. And so if one utility all of a sudden, or multiple utilities, say, well, we're just not interested, the city's holding the bag now for those funds, and the city has no ability to change the tax rate and just build more roads. So being committed to a construction crew also means we need to be committed to a balanced level of underground infrastructure and utility work from year to year. And so there are a few projects that I think we can try to fit in that we do need to do, but we will struggle to pay for those projects. The tuck pointing of the Riverwall downtown. We can spend time and have our staff work on those projects in lieu of other, complete reconstruction projects. But that money won't be coming from the utilities, and so the city's going to be holding the bag. And so this capital plan tries to balance that. And you can see in your sheets, the summary sheets. I've got some graphs in there. You can kind of see some trends. If you look at the first summary sheet, it just has streets. You can see, some years were high. 2019, for example, is a real high year because we also have some of our own regular work plus the East Grand project. 2021 and 2022 are a little deceptive.
because like the 2019 project, in 2021 and 2022, we're proposing Jackson. And that's only if we qualify for STP urban funding through the state, so it's an 80-20 type project. So those are opportunities that we want to take advantage of. So this, just looking at it as a 5-year trend is maybe not quite the best picture to paint, but that was the best I could do for this, for the spreadsheet. Wastewater, you see a steady commitment there. Wastewater plant varies. Those activities are inside the fence, and those are funds set aside through the normal rate schedule. So those can vary a little bit differently. Water utility, you can see we tried to cut back a little bit. Normally we're around $300,000 to $400,000 worth of work through the water utility. We're looking at being around that $200,000 to $300,000 range, which is kind of what they're asking for. Hopefully we can satisfy that and still satisfy our budget. But that's where at the end of the day we may, when we actually start finalizing the budget, we may have to look at some of these other projects and look for some flexibility within our utilities, which have the ability and responsibility to set appropriate rates to maintain their infrastructure. They're required to do that. That's the struggle that the city has. We also have a responsibility to maintain our streets, but outside of bonding, we don't have any other choice. So it's a struggle.
And that $200,000 to $300,000 water is low. I mean, the utility has been in the $400,000 to $500,000 a year where they participated in street reconstruction projects that involve water main. I guess the point I wanted to make here is we have to be very cautious and or cognizant, probably more so, when the utility puts forward its plan, its 5-year reconstruction plan, that maybe doesn't sync up with what hopefully you guys are going to approve at some point. The council, it begs a discussion with utility, and it's been a sticking point for them to admit or to agree to continuing to participate at a level of financing that allows us to keep our crew busy. And it's an issue to balance if we don't do that. So I think I don't want to over stress it, but I want to make sure the point is made that we got to watch that utility construction plan for the sake of our own needs as a city to keep our crew busy.
There's one thing to look at. I'm sorry, I'll just get this out real quick. There's one thing that is not in this when you're looking at these numbers, is it does not include the material prices for the water utility, because the utility, this is essentially the city portion of the construction work, the labor dollars and equipment dollars. With all of the other utility projections here, it's for the whole project except for the water utility. So when you see 200,000 or 300,000, there is more cost to the utility than that, because they still have to provide, they're providing those materials, and the city doesn't see those costs. And so we're not estimating those costs either. So just so, if you're looking at it and you see, well, they're projecting 300,000 and we're projecting 200,000, we're probably looking at the same projects. But the mayor is absolutely right. This has been a sticking point. I think we've done a good job, communicating better, coordinating better. There's still work to do. I think if you sat down with the water utility staff, they'd probably have some complaints about myself and the public works staff as far as planning goes as well. But I think we're making good strides, and like I say, hopefully the city's committed to the model that we currently have. I think it's very cost effective and of great value to the community. So, but it requires all the utilities to step up to the plate.
Well, and with that being said, and Zach, I appreciate you pointing that out, because it does seem like on a general level, utilities and the actual municipality don't always have the best communication, and it's by, well, I shouldn't say it's by design, but unfortunately by design, that's one way. And I do know with my past experience that the city of Marshfield and their utilities do not communicate at all. So I think that we're at least a step further, if not more steps. But with either yourself, Joe, or Mr. Mayor, or even Paul, with the training and education, different things that you guys have seen in the past, are there mechanisms? Can we take a step more forward or another step forward and build more unity, and maybe not just have our Public Works Committee and the Plan Commission, and there again, there's a reason why they're set up that way, but have maybe a joint ad hoc group of people from half and half. I don't know if that the legality behind it, but on the other hand, if there are no decisions made, then it's more of an internal meeting rather than requiring a public meeting type of deal, where it's more dissemination of information and goals, and because although there isn't a perfect overlap of ratepayers and taxpayers, there's a large majority of overlap with them. So
I think the capital improvements plan has gone a long way to build that unity and that open communication. I mean, I think it ebbs and flows, of course, and there's always issues, but I think having a longer range plan so it's transparent, everyone knows, okay, here's what the city's goals are for infrastructure needs, they can kind of come in behind it or fit within it. I think you're on the right track there. There's a lot of municipalities that don't work with their utilities, despite the fact that the city council approves their annual budget, despite, there's a lot of other leverage that the city hasn't had to rely on, but I think it starts with having a good, understood, commonly approved plan, and then hopefully working around that.
And maybe some type of management or staff, or management and staff roundtable, because like you pointed out, Joe, there might be some gripes here and there, and that was one thing, and this is, I guess, a correlation with the private sector, but that was one thing that Toyota did very well, is you have a table like this, and the CEO sat next to the custodian, so everybody heard, and that's how during the late 80s and early 90s, Toyota really blossomed, is that input, and who knows, someone might have that, but if we don't even allow that discussion to happen, or we don't advertise that we really want to be on the same page, then people don't come to the table.
So one of the things that we have been trying to do, unsuccessfully though, to date, is the mayor has regular staff meetings with department heads, and at those meetings, we're reviewing public works project progress. We're reviewing planning activities. We're reviewing priorities for all the departments and how we can interact, whether it's through GIS, whether it's how the police and fire departments talk with the public works departments and vice versa, how we can communicate better, how, the invitation has been there, but we have been lacking any participation from the water and electric utility. Wastewater's there. And regular communication, I think, is beneficial. That's something we'll continue to reach out and make those efforts, because if we understand what everybody's priorities are, we can try to align them so that we're all on the same page.
So, go on.
I sit here biting my tongue a little bit, and I agree that I don't think there's any negotiations involved here. As the owner of both these utilities, they shouldn't be directing the council on what the project's going to be. I really believe that is the council that needs to start directing, and if we have to change ordinance to allow that, then we need to look at doing that. But ultimately, it's a city-owned utility. I don't care about ratepayers. It's a city-owned asset that we own as a city, and I think it's time that I don't want to see council involved in day-to-day operations over there, but I think on a larger scale, there's projects that we need to get done as a city, and both these utilities, to me, there's not an option, and this is what our project is, as it's another department within the city.
Right.
They have some autonomy given by ordinance, but it's still basically another function of the city. And I don't think there should be, I disagree with the roundtable. I think, these are our projects, and they need to align their schedule with, our priorities.
So I did have a meeting with the water utility, and the concerns were, you said that you thought that maybe there were some things that they had complaints about or whatever. They're not. They're very much happy And like they said, everything's not perfect, but I mean, obviously you're trying to combine two different worlds.
Mhm.
With this schedule, and I asked them, and I asked you before, is there a way that we can link this to their, using our IT to say, hey, we're gonna come up with this as our projected program, and then you guys can input what your needs are, and we can sit down and, like you said, or Thad, I apologize, is have a decent discussion about it, and not just with the overlay, but even with this. I mean, this is
So
a
we do
good
that, we do
spreadsheet.
that face to face now.
Yeah.
So, in March, I think it was, I sat down with the water utility staff, and, they had already gone through and worked up a list of projects that were priority projects for the utility. They had done so the year past also. So I had, and I indicate in this sheet, if you look through it, it'll indicate whose priority it was. In some projects, it's both wastewater and storm and street priority. That's the perfect project.
Yeah.
When we go through and we evaluate this, when I get a draft, I pass it on to the utility for review. When I got it put together last month, the utility has had it and has reviewed it. I got some comments back. The main thing they see that is lacking and that I need to add yet is that I didn't specifically add just a line item for raw water. And they wanted to see that in this plan because it's a whole plan. And while the project itself may still be a bit unknown, it's a project that the utility feels is absolutely necessary. So I need to get 2 placeholders in here for 2 years of raw water main projects. Data yet to be determined, as far as the details. So I completely respect that. So
Yeah,
we're
I
moving
do-
in the right direction.
Yeah, and they had indicated that too, so just to be clear, I mean,
Yeah.
there's that relationship, it's moving in the right direction, and that's good, so I'm glad to hear it.
Yes, because it wasn't. A lot of years, but being around here, that it almost seemed like 2 different cities operating, and it's not, so keep up the work.
Yeah.
With this plan, Joe, you mentioned about the council committing towards or whatever, so are you looking maybe like
That
we approved, I mean, they can be
Yes.
changed, it's
The
it's
potential
not set
motion-
in stone.
The potential motion would be to approve the capital improvement plan as shown, including 2 years of raw water main projects that are currently absent from this plan, contingent upon the council's approval of the budgets to actually perform these
Yeah.
projects. So that's always a contingency. That'd be the motion that we'd be looking for. And it's a plan, right? I mean, you can come back and modify a plan. I didn't know if there was any questions about the projects in particular. If you had a chance to look at these over the last month or so, just to take a look at a few of them. And
Well, that's one thing that I guess we as a council would rely on
yeah,
you to point out.
Right.
You're the expert. Between you and Paul and everybody else on the crew, collectively have got a lot more experience than we do. So we need you to give us this, and we can create that continuation by approving this.
so this is certainly our recommendation. And as we move forward, if there are projects where you see you have complaints from residents or there's concerns about conditions, certainly bring those to our attention and we can identify them. Ideally, eventually, every segment of street in the city should be on this plan. We should be planning obsolescence for everything and defining a time when it should be redone. But at least we can look at those and then get them in here. We have projects in here that are far out beyond what you're seeing in front of you. We have this, this spreadsheet. We've got bridge repairs and reconstruction. We have a number of projects that are maybe decades out. But when we know when we think we're going to need to do those projects, we want to get them on the plan so that when that time approaches, that project doesn't get accidentally forgotten.
Well, and then this is also an advocacy tool for the public as well. For example, if there are concerns, if there's concerned citizens that say, well, we're just throwing money at we're just chasing our tail. No, we've got a 5-year plan.
There's a plan,
You know,
Yeah, this plan helps us immensely for maintenance so that we are planning obsolescence.
That's the other thing too, if you guys recall, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, we seal coated Pepper Avenue from Sampson to, Lincoln Street. The next year, we were in there doing water and lights, water main project over that same stretch. So here we just spent $1.75 a square yard in seal coating it, and the next year we ripped it up. You know, so with this plan, you know, we have it on our iPads when we go through and do our maintenance activities, and we're like, oh nope, we got 2 years, and in theory we're going to rebuild this, so we might put a Band-Aid on it to try to get 2 or 3 years out of it rather than going through and doing a full rehab on it or something like that. So you know, in the past we didn't have that tool because we were 6 months ahead of ourselves or whatever, so we did have mistakes, and that's part of the plan is to try to eliminate that. So
Good point. And realistically, once this is approved, it's a working document. We can reapprove an update to it. We can modify it. It doesn't lock us into anything, especially with the budget. I mean, worst comes to worst, we don't have the money, we can't do it, so.
Right.
And that was the question I had for Joel prior to the meeting, and I apologize, so I'll just reiterate it again, which is the flexibility of it. Projects come and go, we have different needs in the community as far as what needs to happen for maybe economic growth or whatever, and then we need to re-gear, but at least we have, you know, a projection, so.
I can almost guarantee that the projects that are proposed for the end of the 5-year plan, there will be a sanitary sewer water main project that, because we will have discovered a certain condition, will become a higher priority, and we'll have to move these things around. I mean, that really goes without saying, but this allows us to plan well and, you know, like Paul said, organize our maintenance activities, provide really the best value we can.
Well, I guess with that said, in terms of time is of the essence, I make a motion to approve this document with the contingency that if monies is not budgeted, then the projects can't move forward.
And including the raw water, I think is what you had mentioned, Joe, to just make sure it's in there.
Including the raw water placeholders.
And of course, I would second that.
Motion and second to approve the capital improvement plan. Thanks for the discussion, everybody. It was very worthwhile, I think, and to me. We'll vote on the committee. All in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. Item 3, discuss refuse collection methods, including automated cart collection.
So I wanted to really focus this particular topic on kind of break it into 2 components. One is direction, whether we want to go with an automated collection program versus a rear loading can collector type program that we have now. And if we decide to go with an automated program, there are a number of details that we'll need to sort out, and we have some time to sort them out. So I wanted to go through this real briefly, so if you would bear with me. The refuse collection trucks are at the end of the service life and need to be replaced. Before ordering trucks, specifications need to be developed, and once ordered, delivery times are expected to be around 6 months. The recently implemented automated recycling program has been well received and complimented by residents, many who have asked when the city will be implementing an automated refuse collection program. There's many service-related policies that must be considered before switching to an automated service. If there's a desire to go automated, policy discussions, public outreach, etc., will take considerable staff time to prepare and execute. I believe once staff is given direction, it'd be reasonable to evaluate the value of in-house versus contract collection services and discuss and draft policies and ordinance language within 3 months. So a general commitment at this time is requested so staff time can be allocated wisely and work within the budget schedule. So I've got some pros and cons of some things that we thought about, staff thought about, as far as changing from a 2-person rear loader to a 1-person automated truck. So advantage is that 1 person less per truck on each truck, and to reallocate that labor
towards other maintenance activities. That results in a reduction in the total fleet size by 2 refuse trucks, which reduces maintenance costs. It doesn't necessarily reduce the capital purchase of the trucks because we're using 2 of our older trucks as backups. We do have significant maintenance costs to run those. The current fleet is 6 vehicles. We got 1 recycling truck, 1 backup recycling truck, 2 refuse trucks, and 2 backup refuse trucks. The proposed fleet would be 4 vehicles, 1 recycling truck, 2 refuse trucks, and then 1 backup truck, because the same automated truck can perform both recycling and or refuse collection. So 1 extra truck is all we need. I think the biggest factor here is that we significantly improve employee safety and workers' compensation liability issues. We eliminate the risks associated with can carrier in the back of the truck. We eliminate lifting thousands of cans per day and the potential injuries that they go along with that. We reduce slip and fall potential injuries, and we reduce the probability of employee being hit by another vehicle. I think this is telling. According to the 2016 USA Today report, refuse collection using can collectors is the 5th most dangerous job in the United States, with a fatality rate of 34.1 per 100,000 workers, and that's twice the risk of fatality of police officers, which is 14.6 per 100,000 workers. So we've been very fortunate. For years, our work comp agent has been telling us you've got to get rid of the can collectors. We haven't had a lot of problems. We've been extremely fortunate. Our can collectors have been healthy, they've been safe, but the statistics are the statistics, and it is an extremely dangerous job. Another benefit is that there's more meaningful work done by operators. Our collection staff will be operators rather than laborers. It eliminates the need for an incentive program where the staff leaves at the end of their route rather than the end of an 8-hour workday. Staff will then be assigned to other maintenance activities and provide more service and value to the community. And it's by having consistent cans, it's also a more aesthetic value to the community. We also believe that there's better overall value to the community. Based on the recycling program, collection should take less time, it's cleaner, more cost effective, and because we're limiting refuse to what fits in the can, we should also be reducing our overall tipping fees. Depending on the program that the city council wants to put together, it's not really a free-for-all, right? So there are some disadvantages though. Implementing a new system does require significant public outreach. My preference is a 6 to 8 month notice in advance to help residents avoid potentially purchasing, new private refuse cans. And if you've priced one lately, they are not cheap. We'd have to inform the public about timing rules changes, which are significant, and there's often some growing pains that come with that. We've got to do public notice related to the distribution of the carts, public education and enforcement of the new program. We've had some enforcement challenges with the recycling program. We're working through a grant right now and through a Harvard research project to look at enforcement differently and how we can, what is the term, a nudge?
Yeah, interventions.
Yeah, right, just different interventions to encourage people differently, and we've got some really neat ideas that we've been talking about there. Implementing the new system is going to require a substantial update to the refuse and recycling ordinance. Eliminating the rear loading trucks require evaluation and significant changes to our leaf collection system, because that's the type of vehicle that we're using for that. The carts have to be purchased and funded, and plans and policies in place for the eventual replacement of those carts. And the carts need to be ordered and delivered, and that is not a project that is easy to do, because it needs to be done as kind of a blitz project. So some policy items that will likely need to be discussed we've been talking internally about developing pros and cons for each of these so that we can come back to you with, with our staff suggestions, but also trying to list, be as objective as possible why a certain component might be good or bad, so that we can try to make a very educated decision. One of the policy items is changing routes from 10 routes to 8 routes. So we work 4 days a week instead of 5, work 10 hours a day instead of 8. But that, for most of our holiday situations, that keeps collection during the work week. Problem with working on weekends is we've got to have maintenance staff available. If a truck breaks down, the scheduling's kind of messed up. We see some real advantages. And Paul's got some great ideas for changing the routes so that those two vehicles are working as a team rather than finishing separate routes. It's one large route, and they're doing it together. It's hard to make those changes as individual changes, but if it's a global thing, we think that would be the time to do it if we're going to do it. The proper size container, 96 gallons, 68 or 64, 48. Do we offer one cart size or multiple cart sizes? How are carts going to be replaced in the future? How are we going to pay for them now? How should refuse and recycling be paid for? Should we consider reducing our city budget and establishing a fee-based system? Should we continue with the system that we have? These are all things that we need to discuss, and some of these things obviously work through our finance director as well. What should the scope of service be? Speaking with or looking at policies from other municipalities and kind of speaking with our assessor department, residential properties are 3 or less, commercial properties are more than 3, from their viewpoint. We're currently doing up to 4, but how do we want to handle those? Multifamily dwellings, townhouses, trailer parks, business, commercial, industrial properties. Should the city handle bulk items? If so, what's our scope? Do we want to do individual fees, schedule appointments, specific times of the year, do a spring and a fall? These are all things that we're going to need to develop into our program. Should the city offer additional a la carte services, such as, I've got a family, if I've got a large family, maybe one cart's not enough. I could maybe pay for a second cart and to have the availability to have 2 carts picked up instead of 1. But because that would be beyond the normal scope of service, it's reasonable to request then additional fee for that. Some municipalities will do a one-time fee. Like, for example, if you can't get it all in the cart and you just have an extra bag, it's $10 because the operator's got to get out of the truck. First he empties the cart, he's got to get out of the truck, throw that other bag in the cart, and empty it again. Some places will do a one-time fee for that type of thing. You want to do it, that's okay, but there's additional costs and it can run into overtime, and it's a reasonable cost to assess then or bill to the property owner. Those are the types of things that we need to consider. The leaf collection program, I mentioned that. Are we going to continue to offer a spring and fall leaf pickup with having 2 compost sites? And if so, what do we want that program to look like, and the budget cost for that? Other desired methods for public outreach, and anything else that we're missing. So we're prepared to work on these items and try to come up with options and put them in a report form so that you can kind of look at them, see what staff considers as pros and cons, to kind of get your creative thoughts in order, and hopefully we're able to help you develop a really successful program that I think the community is gonna like. So at this time, staff recommends that the city council commit to an automated refuse collection system to be implemented sometime in 2019 for our residential refuse and recycling collection, and that's the staff's request.
Well, on my referral, the recycling is an issue for townhouses, condominiums, that kind of thing, where they're individually taxed. Obviously, they've reached out to you guys, but I mean, the point is that they're individually assessed in their individual homes, and they can't get their recycling picked up. Now, are you guys planning to delay that? Or are you gonna stop picking that up, or is there something that we can work on?
So,
Talking about the project we met on.
yeah, I mean, we took a look at it, met with the assessors. Those are townhomes. It's a 0 lot line condominium. We talked to them to get a definition of that. Those are townhomes, and then in accordance with our current ordinance, it's not appropriate for us to be picking those up. But that's the type of language, those are the types of topics that we want to discuss. So,
I mean,
we can
we
do it.
can learn from that, right? So we still have to clean up that language before we even look at going this way.
There's also mobile home parks too that need to be cleaned up.
Right. We've tried some things there that we've struggled with. And
Cause the issue I have is, I think the county had the same issue with not having the ability to, different townships will offer cleanup, because if they're not offering cleanup, where are they gonna go? At the end of city streets, in the woods, wherever there's a vacant lot and a dark light, there's no light at night, they're gonna dump. So I mean, those are the things that I'm concerned about.
Right.
And then go back to the size, not just the size, I mean, I have a bigger family, but I'm just thinking of all the times that I can't even fit them into 2 garbage cans, just, being the size of the family that I have. So that's another issue.
Yep.
And I mean, I think automated has worked well. I mean, I was looking at the ordinance control. I mean, there was 106 in the last 2 months ordinance control related issues along the recycling, and a lot of them had to do with bins facing the wrong way.
Right.
Those are fixable. And I think recycling is a smaller issue. We gotta work out the language with the townhouses and the condominiums and figure out how we're gonna do that. But the other thing is that having them face the wrong way isn't, I mean, that's a learning thing, and we can make sure that we correct that. But I don't see recycling being an issue from too many recyclables. There was only a few citations in here where they actually had stuff over the top of the recycling bin. So I think the appropriate size was right on the mark.
Yep.
But that's obviously a huge concern, is that appropriate size for garbage is completely separate than what the appropriate size is for recycling, and the amount of people go through.
Well, and that was kind of, I inherited some of this because, obviously Jim started it, and then Joe had it for a spell before I had it. And, that was kind of our goal as a group, was to hit the recycling, because if a person has a violation with the recyclables, it's not the end of the world if that sits there for an extra week, because it's not going to stink or anything like that. So we're hoping that with this next, realistically probably 8 months, before we implement garbage, that 100 and some violations will be down to 25 or 50 violations. Then we're being pretty successful as far as I'm concerned. If you're talking about 50 violations a month for 6,000 stops, I mean, that's a pretty good percentage. So if they're all trained,
that's 6,000 stops a week.
Yeah, right. So if they're all trained on how to do the recyclables, the garbage should be pretty simple, right? And I've reached out to, the schedules haven't worked, but I've reached out to the Landlords Association, because truthfully that's where we have the most issues or whatever, and to try to work with them to educate the tenants on the right thing to do and stuff like that. When there is garbage or recycling overflowing, most of the time it's because there happened to be a 32-gallon garbage bag that's slipped into the recyclable containers or whatever, so there's kind of a double-edged violation there for that piece, so the joy of it, I guess, for Lee, for you, we have some neighboring communities that the mayor has challenged us on to look at what they're doing. Why reinvent the wheel, but let's borrow the design of the wheel. So we have some City of Marshfield, Wausau are all contracted services, so those are people that are doing it to be economical and everything like that, so we can kind of see what they're doing. Stevens Point has been doing automated now. I think this is going to be like their 12th year. They started automated about the time that we purchased these 2 trucks that I want to get rid of. And they just purchased their second go round of trucks last year. They took delivery on them. So they've been, they learned some things through it. They did garbage and recycling at the same time period. So, kind of, like I say, rather than trying to reinvent it for ourselves, just kind of borrow the things that they've learned and improvements that they've made over the last 12 years or whatever, so.
I think with this, and this does warrant discussion, there's no question. What I don't want to do is suggest, let's postpone this to the next meeting just to kick it down the can, but this is on its face, especially with the pros and the positives that you have, Joe, there's a lot of very good points, and there's reasons why other communities have went this way too.
Right.
There's big reasons. The only problem that I've got a couple in my head, but one of the major problems that I foresee is that, especially we're talking about the recycling as being kind of a case study moving forward, not everybody recycles in town, unfortunately, and I would guess that there would be a positive correlation with the people that do recycle that are more responsible or will be responsible in terms of correcting issues moving forward. That is, garbage pickup has been one of the great services that the city of Wisconsin Rapids has provided for a long time. And we almost took everything, and we still almost take everything. And that, Lee kind of brought it up. What will happen in the short term? What will happen in the long term if we create now a box per se that people have to put their garbage in? And again, I would suggest that not all of the recycling containers are full when they're picked up, including mine. And I know that it's against city ordinance not to put your recycling container out every 2 weeks, but I'm by myself and I only have, and I recycle everything.
There's actually nothing wrong with that.
Correct. What we want to do is have a stable amount coming in every time. And in fact, with the amount of garbage that I put out, I only put out one 13-gallon kitchen bag every other week. And I think the garbage guys could attest to that, because as they want to come around the corner, they probably can't really see where my tree is, where I put it. So they got to back up. And anyway, it's a case where I'm just worried that, it's the unknown unknowns. We don't know what's going to happen with this. And I don't want it to actually come down to the fact that the citizenry or the residents will say, why are we cutting this service just to cut costs here or there? Because when we talk about government and government provides services that the market sector either can't or won't, or we want to create better services than what the market sector can provide, and we think we can do that, and we have been, to the essence that we've been taking everybody's garbage. Now get to the point where it's compartmentalized and you either got to pay more for added more, or it will get dumped into, and there are some dead ends in town, and that's been the concern over 10, 15, 20 years of people looking at this, and that's my initial concern. I mean, I'm not saying that it's doomsday and that's going to prohibit us moving forward on this, because I think absolute discussion is warranted on this, but moving forward, this is a suggestion that just popped in my head. Are we able to create a pilot program with 1 day route or whatever, 1/10 of the city and then maybe it'd be like on a Monday, or it'd be the same people. Obviously there'd be an added cost to only buying 1/10 of the carts type of a thing, but see what happens. See if there is a major overflow of garbage now on the side, if people refuse to buy 2 carts and we only got it at 1/10 of the population. Maybe even if we got enough recycling containers, spray paint them, put a G on it for garbage. I don't know, but creating a pilot program to see, because if that fails, it might fail all over the city.
Whereas if I truck though.
Well, but do we have a backup though?
We already have a backup.
Yeah.
So to ease your mind a little bit, most communities have already gone this route. This is a proven method. The beauty of doing it in 2 parts is if
if we're comfortable committing to an automated collection system, we have just about a year to actually develop the system. So the specifications, putting those together to purchase the trucks, and we need to start doing that fairly soon. We would need to try to decide when we're going to roll this thing out. We've done it with recycling, so we can, you know, those physical activities, we can develop a calendar for that. But developing the program, right, developing the service, we've got 6 months to do that. And I think that staff-wise, we could be prepared in 3. So that would give the council 3 months to consider it,
Sure.
talk about it, look at what other communities are doing. We can ask those questions and have representatives, you know, we can pull residents in other communities, we can pull, you know, department heads for the, you know, the refuse collection in other municipalities and have them and answer those questions directly. So that we put together a program that provides good service for everybody, but doesn't result in a lot of the community subsidizing for a couple of people, you know, so that it's a good program. It provides good service. You know, we have example carts that if, you know, we could have a meeting over at the garage and we can throw bags of garbage into these carts so you can get a first-hand feeling for how heavy is this thing going to be. When we rolled out our recycling program, there were a number of people that called with some real concerns. And I took that opportunity for people, because we wanted the public input. And the people that didn't want the program, those are the people I wanted to talk to. Because once there was a decision made to move the program forward, I figured if we could please them, everybody else is going to be happy too. So we dropped off carts. I had 90-year-old people moving carts around to figure out, okay, which brand of cart is easier for them to manipulate? How big can it be? We brought stuff over full of recyclables and had them test it. I met in a neighborhood kind of on the southeast part of town, and I expected to meet with 2 or 3 people. They had the entire neighborhood there. There's 25 people rolling the cart in and out of their garage, getting a sense for it, and we took that input and used that to help develop the program. Is the program perfect? No, because we're still talking about some of these issues that we need to resolve. But these are policy issues, and I think that if we as staff can put together pros, cons, you've got questions about what's big enough. We don't want people throwing stuff. Well, how do we prevent that? How do we make the service good enough so that we're being cost effective, providing a good level of service? It doesn't need to be Cadillac. And how can we address those issues where you have a Christmas, where you have extra bags and it's not going to fit in? How can we deal with that in a positive way that's either extremely affordable, extremely easy, and minimizes inconvenience to the public? I think we can do that. And that's where we're going to have to do our job to get you the information you need, pros, cons, what other places are doing, how people like it, so we can develop that. And I think that if we decide to do that, we'll have that information in no more than 3 months, and that'll give you up to 3 months yet to really iron it all out. Because we can, even if we get to the point where we're going to order the carts, and we've got an implementation date set, right? Until we implement it, we have until then to finalize that ordinance. So, I mean, it's likely to be about a year, right? We were kind of thinking a late spring, summer rollout, about, June type. Spring, April, May.
Mayor?
Yeah, just a couple comments, and I think aside from the issues that we still have, lingering issues with recycling that we have to reconcile, the public feedback on that has been overwhelmingly positive. I mean, there are people, biggest complaints are, well, it's a big cart and I can't find room, or it's too small maybe for some families that have a lot of recyclables that are really astute and really good about recycling. But I think aside from the program, and the data shows the 100 or so more tons we collect on a monthly basis, right, that's diverted from the landfill to preserve the life of the landfill. I mean, that's just been a really exciting program, I think, to give ourselves a little bit of backing and confidence that the residents are looking for a similar model for garbage. The other comment I would make real quick on garbage is, from an equity standpoint, from a taxpayer standpoint, I struggle with certain types of properties, generally rental properties, on move-out day, me as a taxpayer subsidizing all of those that we have in our neighborhoods, right? And I think, so I would challenge the committee to be thinking about it from an equity standpoint. As a taxpayer, I don't support removing the garbage and the toilet and the couch and everything else that's at the curb. But that takes an education, that takes a time to change that culture. I think we're probably the only municipality we're gonna find that does that for free at all costs, right? So I think that's just from an equity standpoint, I just wanna make sure we don't lose sight of that component, that we have an obligation to provide everyone a service. It's just how much of service do we provide? And then I'm hopeful that, again, from a cost standpoint, we can divert some of those tipping fees that we're paying to other things. I mean, if we can reallocate that in the DPW budget or streets budget, because we're limiting garbage, I mean, we're collecting this stuff on a weekly basis, so hopefully a 96 or a 68 gallon, which is probably more common, is appropriate. And I think educating people where your alternative sites are, your drop-off sites. I mean, just the paper and cardboard alone in town, having 2 sites that you can take in Rapids to recycle all your paper and cardboard, you know, not to mention all the other garbage opportunities with Advanced or anywhere else. So I think that would just be my comment on equity, just not to over service ourselves just because there are some landlord association maybe that likes that service. I just have a tough time as a taxpayer covering their costs.
Well, you got 2 great points there, Zach, is that one of them is we might even divert more recyclables that are getting thrown into the garbage by constricting the amount of garbage, therefore people get forced to recycle, and then instead of having too much garbage and not enough recycling, it's actually evened out where it's full and full.
Yeah.
But the key thing is what the first point that you made, is the enforcement. I think if we're gonna do it, we have to make a very enforceable policy, whether it's a warning system, a fine system, however it is, because if we don't do that initially, I don't think we'll ever get it back.
And we've already started doing some of that too, which I think is really good.
So just for a note for you, you know, the ordinance, current ordinance reads 332 gallon cans per parcel.
Yeah.
You know, so we've been in violation for that for a lot of years, as long as I've been here. The last 16 months, we've been really trying to be diligent on that. And so when there is the move out, you know, as the mayor alludes to, we aren't picking that up, you know, and we're C-click fixing. That's the device to get the ordinance control officer involved or whatever. You know, well, I won't lie to you and say that we're completely diligent on 332 gallon containers. Sometimes, you know, people call up and say, I just got a new bed or whatever, can I put that out? You know, when they're putting out 1 32 gallon can and they put a mattress in whatever, you know, yes, we still grab that on occasion, you know. But that being said, you know, I think along the lines of what, you know, your thought was on a Monday route of just going with the carts or whatever, I think we can do that the other way without making a huge investment. You know, I'm thinking hanging a GoPro on the front driver's side mirror that's looking curbside, so you can see every single stop that we make for that 4-hour time period, so that you can see, you know, what the size of the cans that are out there. You know, for the most part, you're talking 2 garbage cans, or, I mean, it's really not that bad anymore, you know, except for the rental properties where there's occasional move out or whatever. Otherwise, it's, you know, it's pretty quick.
Well, I have 4 kids and I have it hard to fill up. I mean, my 2 trash cans are full,
Right.
and that's where my issue.
How big are
now
your
is.
cans? 33s?
Yeah,
Yeah, so 64 gallon container.
that's what I'm saying is I would try it, become a believer, but the idea is I still think the program's worthwhile and pursuing. I still think we have to shore up some of the recycling needs.
Yep.
Yeah.
And obviously you know, we've all been getting a lot of calls on some of those things, and we need to make sure that I understand before we leave tonight where we sit on that situation.
And that's where the discussion point is, right? You know, because like our current truck, not saying that we're gonna buy that exact same truck again, we might buy something similar. But the majority of the industry has 1,000-pound arms, okay? So a 96 gallon cart full of water is under 1,000 pounds, you know, so, you know, and nobody's saying it has to be a 48 or a 64. I mean, part of me says 96 too, you know. I mean, that's a discussion point that we have probably 5 months to discuss, and what's the proper size, you know, and we can, you know, one of our trucks has a cart tipper on the back, you know, so if Lee, you want to be the guinea pig, we'll get you a 96 gallon cart and make sure that those guys are driving the truck with the tipper on the back. So if we get to certain properties that have garbage carts, you know, we just hook it to the back of the truck and dump it and see if that's the right thing, you know.
Have a great fourth, I gotta step
Thank
out.
you, Mayor. Well, I'm in favor of us looking to move forward on the thing. But, and it's gonna take time and how long to get a truck and whatever, but also it's gonna be the budget to buy a truck.
Yeah, well, that we're set for, right? And we're gonna buy 2 trucks. We have to. The trucks we have are dead. So we have to purchase 2 new trucks.
Okay.
So there's no issue. I mean, we really should have done it last year. There's no issue as far as, I mean, the need is there to replace 2 trucks, which is why we really want to try to figure out at this point, what direction are we going? Because if we're going to go the direction of automated, I've got to, you know, direct staff to start working in that direction. You know, Paul's got some specs, but we've got a lot of work to do to address the issues, Lee, that you've mentioned and Thad that you've mentioned. And, you know, I've got a laundry list of policy type decisions. There may be more than that.
The unknown unknowns, you know,
Right.
there's gonna be some.
You know, and we have, I mean, some communities have been doing this type of garbage collection for going on 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got lots of examples. There are a lot of things that are gonna be new to us, and we're gonna sit here and second guess it. And you talk to another municipality and they'll say, no, that'd be foolish to second guess that. We tried that and it didn't work. Here's what you should do, here's what works for us. You know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can, you know, when we have topics that we may debate on, there's so many sources of outside information to help explain, well, what's going to be the best way to handle this, you know.
And I think that was one thing too, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
If I can re-emphasize is that enforcement aspect, and I think that a fair share of the phone calls that I do receive are about neighboring properties who are rented by, or have renter occupants. And if I could be wrong, but the process in which, because I was going through like a nuisance process, and it doesn't seem like it actually goes through law enforcement. It actually goes through finance department, which
Ordinance control.
ordinance control.
Yeah.
But it is that, because it's almost
Still a
seems like
citable
there was
offense.
a kind of a hang up, or there was a disconnect in the process, that there could be more of a better way of doing it.
So what we're looking at is different methods for some of that first level communication. And we don't have those methods completely identified, but some of it is, for example, you probably relate pretty well to the mailman, or maybe to your garbage collector. Probably relate to them somehow. A lot of people do. And they may not relate so well to the enforcement officer. So if our messaging can be from our recycling truck driver,
Mm-hmm.
you know, with this picture, hey, I'm Jer, and here's the situation here. Can you help me out? And we've talked about different, different techniques that if we can do it right, people will want to comply, right? Because that poor guy's got a lot of stuff to pick up, and we don't want to make life worse for him than we have to. And boy, if all I got to do is turn it around, or if we can put a sticker on, or we have problem areas, put a sticker on it. Oh yeah, that side's got to go to the street, or this side's towards the house, you know, or whatever. That there's other methods that we're looking into on that first contact, so that we don't have to get it to ordinance control.
For corrective purposes,
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
Because a lot of it is just simple. It's 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm not paying attention, or it's 7 o'clock in the morning and my kids took it out to the end of the driveway while they were waiting for the school bus or whatever, and you know, it's hilarious. You don't see the stamped piece in the top of it, and they don't pay attention to that 6-inch. Hey, you did this wrong. That's put on the handle, you know, and you go and verbally communicate with the person. Hey, we didn't pick up your recycling today because you put the cart out backwards, or you had too much stuff in it, you know, and oh, really? Well, that's just done with my part. Sorry about that type thing, you know, and so you try to work with them and some of them, some people you can't, right? You know, but you try to,
I guess that's where I'm kind of going, is that I wanna say, I would hope that 90% of everything is correctable.
And I think that we have potential methods to include in our policy to deal with some of that. Some of these issues like garbage, right? I don't wanna leave somebody's garbage, because that affects the community. Now I've got a stinky mess that the neighbors have to put up with, you know? So we can develop potential fees associated with non-compliance. There's still citation authority through our ordinance. But if it doesn't follow the rules, where we could impose fees for the extra work required, we'll do the extra work, but you're gonna pay the fee. You know, we can discuss those types of methods and, you know, and try to alleviate those problems that, you know, you wanna put it out wrong, we'll get it anyway, but you'll get a bill, you know?
But then
Kinda
that,
like unmowed grass.
well, that's, but
Right.
what happens if it's,
If it's chronic, then it still goes through the ordinance control system.
or if there is someone renting the property, would it fall back onto the landlord, the property owner? Would it
Yeah.
go onto their taxes then?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
well, and that's where my opinion is, as me providing the service, I'm providing the service to you as the taxpayer. And it just so happens that in that situation, the tenant has a contract with the landlord. I still have a contract with you as the landlord, not with the tenant, you know, so.
sure.
That's just my
Yeah,
opinion,
I
that's
mean,
my
it-
opinion of it.
And those are the policy discussions that I wanna try to address. You know, what I would plan to do is if we decide that we're gonna go ahead with, automated refuse collection in 2019, we'll put this list together for next month. We'll try to break it up into 3 components, because we're not gonna solve all these problems in one evening. We'll try to break this up into several components. We'll try to attack each set over a period of a couple of months. And then we can kind of look at the whole and do we have any conflicts here? We've talked about these things over a couple of months. Does this make sense? It gives us time to do some research if there's some areas where, you know, we wanna, and, you know, get some public input, get some other input from other municipalities, and, you know, and really spend some time on these significant policy issues so that we can provide good service.
How long did it take last time to order the recycling truck or the recycling bins to actually receive them and then just?
The truck was 6 months. I've talked to manufacturers here, within the last month or two, and it's a little bit different now because of the current truck that we have is made in Canada, so the tariffs and things like that are on it, and it's a little bit longer term on it, but it's still right around that 6 or 7 months. The carts, I think we had those ordered for 6 months, and we called them because we weren't hearing from them to say, hey, you know, we got to have those carts by, I think it was December 1st or something like that. And I think we called them in October, and they had them to us the end of November, and then we delivered them the 2 weeks prior to Christmas. I think, or maybe it was the first weeks of December, because they sat there for like 2 weeks before we used them.
Yeah, because it took a couple weeks to get them out.
The truck came in later than what it was supposed to. Had issues with the build out on it or whatever. So yeah, I guess my thought is that you know, like probably in August would send out the request for proposals on the trucks, and then approve them in September to look at them in delivery of March or April, so that we could, in theory, the first part of May. Our thought is if one of the items on there is if we deliver them versus having the company deliver them, you know, we get that end of winter, spring time period, depending upon what goes on, is kind of a slow time period because we can't necessarily start a construction season yet because there's still frost in the ground. And you know, except for this year with 20 inches of snow, we don't have a lot of winter activity. Sometimes the spring can be a long drawn out affair. So that's kind of the time period where we sometimes look for something to do. So that would be a productive project for 2 or 3 weeks for us to do.
Is that, this is way ahead, but I mean, is that something that we could even have residents pick them up if they wanted? Cause that would almost be like a buy-in, they would kind of, they're picking their.
Those carts are big enough, it'd be, unless you had a truck,
Yeah.
it'd actually be hard to fit even the 64-gallon container, 64-gallon containers. It's pretty big, you know, to slip in a trunk or something, so. I think the delivery is the best way to go. Either way though, you know, we are challenged with record keeping now. We wanna use some of the modern technology, and even if we don't use the technology, we're making sure right now all of those cans have an RFID tag in them. So, you know, we can scan them if we chose to do so and can monitor where they're at. We have track of the serial numbers so that if your can disappears, and all of a sudden we see 2 cans at some place or whatever, you know, if there's any question, we can verify the serial number if we had an RFID, and we could scan it that way too. But we want to keep those records because they are a city asset. We want to, you know, if something shows up somewhere, there's a can down by the river, a can in a park, where did that can belong? Where did it go?
Well, you're looking for a motion to approve
For that direction, right?
for the direction?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need a motion for that, do we?
Well, we really do.
Because in order to bring it up in front of council.
Yeah, I think what Joe's looking for is a motion to approve the fact that staff is gonna be now working on it, so you're gonna be spending.
Right, the city has a desire to go to an automated garbage collection program in 2019. And that would be the limit of the motion. And, you know, as we get going, if policy making takes more time, we can address that, right?
Well, and also, as far as this goes right here, even if worst case scenario, we spend staff time and everybody looks at it and it doesn't work, I think that it was well worth spending the time to do it. You know, I mean, it doesn't.
It's something that's gonna get done, you know, now, and now's the time. We need the trucks. What truck to get, so, otherwise this discussion's gonna go on. Should we go to automated? It won't be the year after if you buy it. Stay the same if we do, but, that'll be there, so it's worth the discussion to resolve it and see what to do, but, it's gonna take some, I guess the direction we can give is to look at that route. It's gonna take, I don't know how many, so I won't say several meetings, but it's gonna take some lengthy meetings. Maybe, at least a couple, I would think,
I think it
real
will.
lengthy.
It's an important service.
Cause there's a lot on this, and I'm sure there's much more. I like what's here in print, you know, if we talk about it, we might triple the number of sheets or whatever, you know, and then what is the best, so I think, for myself to look, to proceed into, of urgency if we're gonna go that route because of buying the trucks, and if we're gonna wanna roll out next April or May like that, you know, we're gonna have to be doing that here in the fall.
And that's
Buying
time,
ordering trucks.
that's time allowed too, right? You know, I mean, if we don't get our stuff done, you know, as far as getting the ordinance written, figuring out how we're gonna pay for them, you know, maybe it ends up being a September, you know.
Yeah, that's why I thought
Yeah.
if the recommendation is to commit to a program to commence in 2019, then even our first public outreach can be, you know, the city intends to go to an automated collection system in 2019. So consider that when you're looking at the condition of your own cans, right? You make a decision whether or not if your cans are end of life, well, will they go for another, you know, 6 months or
Well,
whatever.
I like that point. I like if we could almost implement a style that we did for the zoning rewrite. Now, obviously, the zoning rewrite under state statute, there's guidelines, but if we could do something like that and have an open house and like you said, have cans available where people
We
can
had
push them out.
cans here in City Hall.
And we're sitting out here.
When we did the recycling,
Okay.
and people came, when we informed people that we had stuff here, obviously we do it a little bit different. We probably try to figure out what kind of weight we're dealing with. Garbage is generally around 4 pounds, 4 pounds per gallon. That we would try to load the cans with something inert, so that people can move them around at, what would be, we had recycling, we can't leave garbage here because it's gonna stink.
Sandbags, we could put sandbags.
Right, well, and hopefully something that's a similar volume, so that when you go to tip it back, if you had it full, it would feel exactly the same as what you might expect if you
Not all
filled
the
it with
way to the
bags.
bottom.
Right,
Build up.
yeah.
Lee, what if you just kinda hung out
Yeah.
outside the container?
I can do that. I can do that. Got nothing else going on with my life, which is why I'm here until 7:30 on July 3rd.
I'll make the motion.
I was just gonna say,
You can second it.
I'll second the motion.
Motion and second to,
Approve the automated.
approve automated cart collection. That's the route the city's looking at going, or investigating. Committee, all in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it.
Just the last topic, can we get those cans in City Hall as soon as possible to start getting that?
Sooner the advertising.
The sooner we can get it out to the public, to let them chew on it, that'd be better.
Are they gonna be the same as a recycling can, but just maybe a different color, or? Cause that's the way I noticed the point, you go to the point, they have, on each side of the driveway, and they look to be similar, cause some of them have spray paint on it, G for garbage.
Some do different color cans, some do different color lids. What we had initially proposed was doing green for the recycling and brown for the garbage. And that way, the lids do break over time, that if we kept a collection of lids and they get brittle and break, we can just replace the lids type of thing. Yeah, and when we had residents test the carts, hands down, especially the older folks, like these toter carts. The way there were some people that, the larger carts, when the wheels were set further back, they couldn't tip them to roll them. And this was the only cart that they could tip to roll. I haven't seen a whole lot of issues with them tipping over. And that was the other concern as well. In the wind, do they?
No, they're
So we could
they're
get
quality.
several sizes and have them available.
Thank you.
Yeah, my only thing is, like Lee brought up, is that occasion where you have more, and whether it's
How do we handle
go
that?
to city garage and buy a sticker, and if I'd have them on hand at home, I can just plop on a garbage
Yep.
bag that, here's my sticker,
Yep.
or whatever.
Paid for extra collection.
How do you not counterfeit it? So that would be a whole process with
Yeah.
it. But yeah,
Well, most times what happens is the municipalities, if they do it as a sticker route, it gets recorded that, so-and-so's got 3 stickers, and, the driver marks it off, and
I'd keep them
back,
on hand.
they hand it off at night, and the next morning, the administrative assistant at the garage is entering the date in the database, and, or this place, no, they didn't buy a sticker. Guess what? That's theft of service. That's actually a crime. So we can address that stuff. We've addressed people dumping garbage in parks. I'm not so proud that we won't open a garbage bag and see whose name's on the envelope and chase them back down and tell them, hey,
All right, to move along here, now we're to this item that's been talked about for a month and a half, I guess. Item 4, review the West Side Lift Station change order request.
Okay, so as you know, our lift station project's come to a halt because of rock excavation. The issue isn't specifically that there is rock, because there was rock identified in the original soil borings. It's where the rock's located is substantially different as far as it's at a much higher elevation in some places than was anticipated, and the contractor has spent already quite a bit to attempt to drill for pilings and do some shoring work, things like that. So we had our engineer review the situation. The first thing I wanted to do is be absolutely certain that this is a change in conditions. This isn't just the contractor looking at the project and saying, gosh, this isn't how I bid it. So I need to try to figure out how to make myself whole. And our consulting engineer had reviewed it. Last month we approved some additional soil borings. Those confirmed it. So we're confident that in fact the conditions are different than what the project was bid as, and so a change order is appropriate. We can go through all the individual sheets, but the bottom line is that when we started working with the contractor, their initial, shoot from the hip estimate was around $500,000 is what it was gonna take. Their first proposal that they sent staff for review was $326,000. We sat down with them, evaluated that. There were a number of things that they didn't deduct from the original contract. There were a number of things that we felt were a bit unreasonable. We had a number of discussions with them, and at the end of the day, today, we are at a place where it's about a $203,233.70 change order, which is still very significant. Really the only part that is that wouldn't have happened if the project would have been bid correctly is some of the administrative costs by Myra, and I think there's about $90,000 of that if the project would have been bid as the conditions currently exist and there wouldn't have been a change order, I think it would have been about $95,000 less than what this change order is for. But even then, they were about as flexible as we feel that they could be in adjusting it. They were, I think, initially almost $150,000 just in administration, equipment fees, idle equipment fees, things like that for lost time on the project. So, we're to a point where our consulting engineer has looked at this. We've looked at it. We've had numerous phone calls, and we believe that this change order is appropriate, and we'll get this project back on track. It is also the additional $203,000 is less than the $321,000 that was approved by council as part of the borrowing for this project. So this change order is well within what was already approved, but it's a change order, and so by our ordinances, the Public Works Committee has the authority to approve this. And if approved, I will actually contact the contractor tonight because they are ready to roll.
That was one of my questions.
In fact, one of the contractors was out there. They had asked, and I said, if you choose to commence, you're doing so at your own risk. But they're chomping at the bit because they have other projects, and some of the what happens is the actual lift station will get moved slightly to the southeast, and there's some additional tree clearing and things like that, some fence removal that needs to take place to accommodate that. They're actually out there today doing some of that work already, so they're ready to go. They don't want to see any further delays either. So with that, I'm confident in recommending that this change order for $233.70 be approved, and it's all covered under our Clean Water Fund loan that we already have, and it is underneath the total amount that was approved by the council.
I guess as far as I'm concerned, if because again, relying on staff's recommendations,
right?
If there isn't anything that, if this is all legitimate, I can't see why I wouldn't vote to move this ahead, because we got to get this done. We're already probably committed, but two, it's a case where we need the West Side Lift Station to get upgraded, and we need it as a piece of infrastructure as well. The one thing that I will ask though is, and obviously we were just talking about unknown unknowns, are we through the woods with the rock portion as far as it? Will this
covers it?
It's almost a guarantee, so that if there is any other change orders, it won't be related to this.
Right. So if there's additional rock, it's covered as a lump sum, or not a lump sum, a unit price towards excavation. So if there's more rock, there may be some more costs, but it's costs already itemized in the project. The methods won't change. The methods, because of the additional borings,
you know, the contractor knows what's out there, and, you know, they've reviewed various methods. We even looked at and did a slight redesign of the lift station. At the end of the day, that wasn't less costly. They're confident in their methods now, and that this is what it'll take to move the project forward.
Well, I think Joe and staff, you guys, I think, if you really think that we're as low as you can get them to go, you know,
I
you
do.
think there's still some to take out, but it's not gonna happen.
It won't happen.
And
right?
this has to move along, and it's not gonna do us any good to delay it further.
Yeah.
'Cause it
And the
has to
delay
be
costs
done.
are $2,300 a day.
Yeah,
You know, so we do wanna, you know, we wanna be prudent, but at the same time, if there's any questions about any of the specifics in here, you know, I've gone through these with, you know, with the contractor, I've gone through them with our consultant, so, you know, I think if you do have any other questions, certainly feel free to ask, because, I think I can address them.
So the delays were $2,300 a day, but this paperwork was given June 28th. Why do we have an emergency public works meeting?
Because on June 28th, the change order was for $326,000. Oh, okay, so June 28th, right, so I had talked to them at that time and said we are having a standard public works meeting on Tuesday, and they were willing to waive a couple days of fees because they also wanted to make sure that they had time to review this, and we reviewed it. So we had this, but we've spent the last several days discussing and clarifying all of these other documents to make sure that we are, you know, that every deduct is appropriate, that nothing was missed, that type of thing. So there was still some work taking place, but in good faith, they stopped the clock.
Okay. With that, I make the motion to approve the change order
I'll
for the
second.
west station, the west side lift station.
I'll second it. Any other questions, committee? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor, respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. Item 5, review the referral list.
19.
19 can be taken off, and we got the highlighted one of 20. Is that something?
No, 19 has to be brought up.
Yeah, 19 has,
Okay.
19 has to
We
be
have
brought
to-
up.
We have to discuss that and look at that, because, just to be clear, are you guys stopping the recycling pickup?
Are you still picking it up?
They were, what is it,
2 weeks ago?
no, it was the second week of July, so I think they have one more pickup, this week. No, it was the
It was
next,
based off the fact the amount of cans, or what?
No,
Because
the
you made a-
ordinance.
no, city ordinance says.
So we need to have a special meeting for item 19.
Okay.
We don't have a choice.
Why?
Because we're telling residents, and for 2 months this has been on our referral list, and we haven't discussed it. We're telling residents that we're not gonna pick up the recycling, even though we originally were. And we gave them a second week of July notice that they have to go to a third-party service, and we charge them full taxes for it.
It was 2 months.
What's full
Yeah.
taxes?
We gave them 2 months
Yeah,
notice.
and I've had it on the referral list for 2 months.
What
And now we're
item?
stopping their services, and if we're gonna stop their services, then we need to make sure that we have a discussion before their services are stopped.
So just so you know, nobody else gets that service, right?
This is why we gotta go through this ordinance and discuss it. Because they're individually assessed homes,
They're not, they're townhouses.
and they're condominiums. And we
There's
have,
lots of condos,
we
there's
have-
lots of townhouses.
and we
None
have
of them get
duplexes,
service.
we have duplexes on the other side of the road.
A duplex is
Shane,
not, yeah.
aren't they in your
a
district?
Duplex is not a,
I have 0 lot lines across from me.
Right, do they get services, recycling services, how is that any different than this?
zero lot line duplex or
Yeah.
townhouses? Duplex.
Right.
Yeah, a duplex is not a townhouse.
That's why we have to review this ordinance.
I don't even know, what is the story behind this? Where were we even
The
talking?
story behind this is that there is, which I thought were apartment buildings down the road from my house until they contacted me 2 months ago. And they are actually individually assessed houses
They're townhouses.
or condos. labeled and the sign out front
They're
says
not a part of
condos.
the building that are
But they're not-
assessed as one unit.
Right, they're individually, so you buy them as an individual resident of the city of Wisconsin Rapids, they just all happen to be under one roof,
And they're taxed individually.
and they're taxed individually.
Are they taxed at the same rate as a single family home?
But they're
No,
taxed
they're
for
assessed, they're assessed as
services.
a, no,
But their
they're
tax rate is the
They're not.
same as,
their tax rate would be the same as any other townhouse that doesn't get garbage collection or doesn't get recycling collection right now. They're receiving a service that nobody else receives.
How many townhouses do we have in the city of Wisconsin Rapids?
You have to check with the assessors.
so we have,
So the discrepancy is we have a duplex, that's a zero property line. That we-
Which isn't a townhouse, right? The ordinance is specific. We do not collect
Which is why
recycling from
we have to
townhouses,
review this
fourplexes. Right.
so anybody that gets garbage services gets assessed differently?
They may, yes. Yeah, when the assessors develop the value of the places, they take those things into consideration, whether they receive those services or not.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
At least that's what Steve, our assessors told me.
Because I guess, forgive me of understanding or, obviously looking at certain things, and that's what I kind of understood with the recycling concern that I had brought forth a while ago, was that there's kind of a distinction between like a income generating property, which would be like an apartment complex,
Right.
because there's a landlord that's actually generating profit, and it isn't their domicile.
Sure.
They've got a house somewhere else. But if I'm understanding correctly, with a zero lot line like a condo, or with what you have, is you have more than four within, like more than a quadplex, or what, even if it was a quadplex. But if they're all individual owners, then no one's making a profit, so that is their actual domicile.
That's not the
Right.
case of this situation though, there is rentals included in that.
So they're,
But they're defined as a townhouse.
They're
And
defined
the
as a
ordinance
condo.
defines, no, they're defined as a townhouse. I mean, you can check with Steve Shepard, we sat down with him,
well,
apply no pressure to him whatsoever. What are these, because we're looking at the ordinance, we're trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. We wanna make sure that we're following the ordinance. What are these particular places? And, no, those are townhouses, and it was instantaneous, no questions asked.
I guess on the aspect that there probably could be rentals in there, because if I own
Sure.
a townhouse and then I moved out to a bigger house and I wanted to rent it, but if that was my sole residence and I don't have a house, I don't, I guess I would be kind of concerned, or I can see where I would be concerned, because if I'm paying the same tax rate. Now granted, property taxes is made up of land and improvements.
Right.
The land, if there's zero lot line, the question is there any,
Less, right.
yeah, so there'd be a very marginal or rather minimal land.
Assessment to the property, right.
but it's
Of the
based on
land
assessed
portion.
value, it doesn't matter, if you've got a $500,000 house or a $50,000 house, you're still getting garbage collection, you're just assessed higher because it's a higher value.
And that's actually one of the topics that I think is important as we move towards potentially looking at refuse, is who we're gonna collect from. Right now, we're collecting refuse from some and not recycling. We're collecting recycling from some and not refuse. And,
gray area
there's some
that-
problems with some
that's
of
been
that, right?
developed.
Because if we're collecting recyclables but not refuse, and they're
Yeah,
paying
that
for
makes
refuse based on weight, they might recycle more.
Right.
But if they're paying for, those decisions all of a sudden are maybe not so consistent as far as what the city's collecting and what isn't. And if we go to an automated process, right, we have to look at, are we going to contract then? Because we won't be collecting dumpsters. Our equipment won't do that. So we're gonna contract that service? Or are we gonna look at facilities where they would contract that service? Are we gonna look at carts? If you have a high density situation, are you gonna accept having literally as many carts as you can possibly fit with that 3-foot spacing in that area of concentrated housing? and eliminate parking from those areas, so that you can collect those.
That wouldn't eliminate parking in that situation, and
It
they'd be
would?
more, no, they wouldn't, and the other thing is they would be more than willing to go down to a 3 as a combined type thing of recycling, but the point is that they're being assessed for the value of their house, paying full taxes, and they don't get the service.
Yeah, but so is an industry, so is a commercial.
Do we pick up commercial?
We don't pick up commercial, no. These aren't.
Right, I mean, those, their value is appropriate for the services that they get. And the council, I mean, if the council decides that the city's gonna pick up everybody's garbage, everybody's recycling regardless.
That's not what we're saying.
No, you can. I mean, that's a decision.
That's not what we're saying.
If you
So
want
we
to.
don't have to talk about it, that's not what we're saying.
One of the complications, though, is that if we go down a route of collecting from townhouses, one of the reasons why we don't do that is that we really have no business running our city trucks in on private roads, and that's what we're doing. And we have the same issue when we go into,
I wouldn't know if that alley is private or not. I'll find out, but I don't know for
Yeah.
sure.
we have some of the same issues with the,
They have 3.
with the mobile home parks.
They have 3 units. One's on 22nd Avenue, one's, one they don't have an access road, the other one has an access road.
It's a
And
horseshoe.
they
the
pay,
access
yeah.
to both of them.
Is there?
Yeah.
Is there?
2 off at 21st and then nothing off at 22nd.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but
No.
in the assessor's note, it is assessed as a 2-story wood townhouse, is how they read the individual.
And that's why I had on the,
The legal description, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
Yeah.
2-story wood townhouse.
So. I thought these.
Actually, we probably should, so if you wanna have a special meeting to address that particular issue, we should probably do that. We probably shouldn't continue discussing it though here because
Right.
it's not an agenda item,
Yep.
so.
Right, yep.
True, we can't make a decision.
we can't make a decision, but we can
But
still discuss the
it is
referrals.
on the document, so, but, yeah, I mean,
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
wanna split hairs with it, but, I mean, yeah, it should be, whether it's a special meeting or
Before council or something.
before council or
Well, they have that planning. There's that,
5 o'clock.
the planning, commission meeting, a special planning commission meeting before the next city council.
Public hearing, right?
It's,
Then we got
No,
finance
public
next
hearing.
Tuesday.
Well, I guess the other option, or the other thing is it's be 2 pickups
To August.
if you go another month. I mean, but then is it gonna be?
Again, is it fair though then that we're picking
Right.
up from this place and none of
look,
the other
I
ones?
completely understand. I mean, I know exactly, and that's exactly what I said, is you gotta understand that they're following what the ordinance reads.
Right.
I said, I'm not gonna argue that. I've read the paperwork. I agree with
Yep.
it. The problem is that there was 2 months in a lag time and it didn't make an agenda item. So we're sitting here and we pretty much forced them to third-party service, and we didn't have that discussion prior to forcing them to a third-party service.
We didn't force them to a third-party service. We provided them service that they shouldn't have had for several months that other places don't have, right? I mean, so.
Yeah,
they're
that's
not-
what I'm saying. It's a
they're-
great
They're not
area.
any
Yeah.
different than anyone else.
No, and
It's
I'm just making
It's
up.
just that it's a change for them, and it's a change for them at a time that isn't consistent with when we rolled out the program.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's the things that we can learn from the recycling that we should
Yep.
be able to put into the refuse, is
Right.
to say, hey, we've made these mistakes on rolling this out, or
Yep.
we supplied containers to, but the
Right.
point is, we did supply containers,
We
so
did not.
now we have to really look at what we're
We
doing.
didn't supply containers to them.
They don't have containers? So what are you picking them up in?
You stopping and picking up parts yet,
Picking them up.
you know, just the bins.
Just to let you guys know also, I emailed you a referral tonight
Okay,
during the meeting, just a parking thing,
sounds good.
exemption on the overnight parking. But I emailed Tom and Joe and Paul. It's for, I guess it's really no big deal, but it's just for, cause some streets you don't have the option to alternate side park because of no parking. So I'm just looking for an exemption for those property owners.
So I don't know how you wanna handle this, as far
Wanna have a
as,
special meeting to discuss it, or?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's something, that we can do right before council unless, because it sounds like
Because it would require the
thing.
Ordinance.
rewrite of an ordinance.
Right.
Yeah.
So the city attorney's gotta have a kick at the cat.
Yeah. Do we need a special meeting to have her draw something up to see if we approve? Or-
No, I think what we would wanna do is, at the next meeting, decide how, what your intent is.
Okay,
Then we
yeah.
can evaluate,
Yeah.
what costs we might have and have the attorney draft something up prior to the council.
Quit putting the cart before the horse there, I guess.
Yeah, cause I mean, we would also need to know how many townhouses are in this city.
Yep.
And that type of, to get a full scope of what are we looking to eliminate or what are we looking to take on?
Yep.
And what are the costs associated with that? And I wouldn't, once again, I don't wanna do it, I don't wanna make exceptions for individual people because that doesn't look good for the city to be doing that.
Right.
And I understand that there's a lot of gray areas that have been created.
Throughout the rollout of the
Throughout
process.
the rollout
Yeah,
process,
absolutely.
but we gotta shore them up and at least have a discussion about it.
Is there a condo association that they pay fees
Yes.
to?
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of the concern when I met with them, is that their dues were set for this year already, and I believe it was $75 a month, I think, to switch over to a third party or something along that lines. And their fees didn't associate to that, and they meet quarterly.
Do we have a recycling drop-off location like at the garage?
Yeah, we have carts outside our office if there's people that miss something or have bulk items or whatever. It's carts that we still
Three of them
have.
sit out there.
Okay.
We still have the blue totes in our lunchroom that we take and dump into the 3 carts that are outside the office, and then if it's twice a week or 3 times a week, that juror empties those or whatever, so.
Sure. That's good to know, just in case somebody calls,
That's a good idea.
Well, how do we wanna proceed?
You want it on the August agenda, or what's your?
Yeah, I guess that's my thing, how long do you wanna wait? And it doesn't have to be a special agenda, but it might have some discussion so that, don't wanna load up the agenda either, if we don't have to.
Because I think at that point too, you can discuss whether or not you wanna make it a special issue to take care of it right away, or if you wanna include it in the discussion for the big change to the ordinance that'll incorporate both refuse and recycling. You have that.
And I do understand that, but yeah, we're still at the point where we're kicking this down the road and they're,
Pick that up and not recycling.
Picking up both.
But starting, let's say in a couple of weeks, would you only pick up garbage then?
You wouldn't pick up anything.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I mean, I don't know what the correct way to proceed is.
Is there anything that can be resolved, I guess, by meeting next week with a one issue meeting, which I'm not laughing at?
Well, would we have to have a special meeting in order to give the city clerk and staff the ability to look this up?
No.
Or not the city clerk, but the attorney? Do we have to have a meeting or a motion for that?
No, that's internal, that's just staff work.
So can we have that set up and put it for the next agenda meeting? That's fine.
Sure.
It'll have to be,
I mean, the essence, I guess, the word that I'm looking at, maybe other communities have something already, why reinvent the wheel? Like Stevens Point's been doing it for 12 years. The word domicile, I guess that's where the sticking point comes back for me. Regardless if it's a townhome, but if it's, Grandma Jones and that's where she resides and she doesn't,
Yep.
it isn't an income thing.
So we've looked at some of those. We've looked at Oshkosh, for example. Their language is almost identical to ours as far as, except they limited it 3, because three dwellings or less is not considered commercial. More than 3 is considered commercial or townhouse or
by
whatever.
state.
They exclude that. They don't provide any service to those at all. No mobile home parks, no commercial residential, like more than a 3-plex. So 4 or more, like right now, for example, we still collect 4. We won't do more than 4. no townhouses, that type of thing. So, and there's reasons for that other than that it'd be good to get them. It becomes challenging to collect from that high a density when you don't have enough curb space to do it.
It's an efficiency,
Right.
issue,
But I'll put it on the agenda. We'll get number of townhouses, and those types of facilities in the city. Is there anything else that you might need for that?
The only thing I could think of is, the number of units per townhouse, you know, like you got a townhouse unit, and if predominantly we see 5, then we would wanna capture it, at least for argument's sake, so we have a better understanding.
Okay. Yep, the assessors department will help us with that. They've been pretty speedy when we've made those requests in the past, so.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay, then we're to item 6, last one, that's to adjourn, committee.
Motion.
Second.
Motion second to adjourn, all in favor respond by aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it, we're adjourned at 8:06, I guess.